Alright everyone, welcome to the video. We're gonna take a look at the experiment to set up the AD. And in our topology, we try to do today, we try to set one domain, let's say lincham.com. And for this one domain, we try to set 2 DC domain controller. We try to use the Windows Server 2012, the first machine as the first DC, and the second one as the second DC. And also we try to set up the subdomain, which the cs.lincham.com, with its controller as you use the third machine to set as its controller. And also we try to set a client, sorry for my typo, use Win10 to set as our client. Let's move it. Okay. And okay, so let's log in to our first machine, Windows 2012 with a dashboard. Okay, so after login, the first thing is we need to check our host name. Okay, we need to check our host name. We do make sure this machine has been set our DC for our lincham.com. So the host name. Okay, so we can make sure this is the host we are using, we are logging. Okay, and we try to take a look at the IP. Okay, this is our IP, 192.168.44.129. Okay, it's preferred. It's a preferred IP. Because we're setting the domain, so our IP should be preferred. It cannot be have like the dynamic IP. Okay, IP kind of like we should fix the IP. Otherwise, in the future, the client cannot find out the IP with the domain. Okay, so we should set the fixed IP. So this is a preferred IP. That's fine. And one more thing is like, because we're setting up our domain as lincham.com, right? Then in case we do have the lincham.com in real life, so we try to set our DNS service as our own self. Okay, as I told you before, we go here, Network and Sharing Center, and we click Ethernet, Property, IPv4. Okay, IPv4. For the DNS service, we try to, let's see, let's fix this. Okay, let's fix this. .129. Okay, remember that's our IP for this host. And gateway, it is .2. And the DNS, we try to set by our own self. Okay, use our local host. Local host is our local machine, is our DNS server. So 127.0.0.1, that's our local host IP address. Always point to our local host. Okay, press save. One more time. Okay, that's our DNS server. Now it's our local host. Okay. All right. So we can set up our AD. All right. So far we already have the basic setting, And in the Windows 2008, when we need to install the AD, we only need to DC prompt. Sorry, there's no space. But you can see now our AD domain service installation is being reallocated into the server manager, which means start from the Windows 2012 version, we don't use the command to install the AD anymore. Instead, we should go to server manager. Okay, we should install our AD here. We click manage. Okay, remember in the first setup, when we try to set the telnet, we add a feature, right? So we try to add a row. Okay, we click add row and feature. Next, role based, yes, not remote. And this is our host, okay, -1, our IP address, our operating system. We click next. And in here, the role, we try to select the ADDS. Okay, ADDS. And because this is our, we try to set this as our DC. Okay, so we need to provide the DNS service to the others. So we select DNS as well. Okay, we set the first machine, our host number 1 for Windows 2012 as ADDS and the DNS. Right? Remember, we set our DNS service as our own self. Okay, 197.0.0.1. Okay, our host is our DNS service. And we go next and next. And we can restart the destination service in case if we need, and give some time to install the ADDS and the DNS. Okay, now we start installation. So until here, someone may ask, hey, Lin-Chen, we didn't enter the domain name, right? In our topology, we try to set the first domain as linchen.com. But in the option here, there's no option give us to set the domain name. Right? So it's very normal because for this AD installation, actually we have 2 steps. When we try to set this host as the DC domain name controller, then we can set the domain name there. All right, so you will see. Give it some time to set up the ADDS and DNS. Okay, you can see now. Installation succeed on the Windows 12_1 on our host. So we can close it. All right. All right, let's keep going. So we already installed the first step for the AD, and then check here. In the second step of installation, it will ask you to promote this server to the DC we click this. This is second step. Okay, this is second step. So here we try to add a new forest. Why? Because this is our first AD, and we try to set this host as our first DC, right? So now we try to add a forest, and for the root domain name, that we mentioned, we say linchen.com. Okay, linchen.com. We go next. And we don't need to change all this stuff. Okay, for the DSRM password, so this password will help us to restore, recover, and sometimes even rebuild our AD. Okay. So what you need to do, just set a password. And as always, if you set a password, do remember, don't forget it. Okay, keep that in mind. Or keep a place, record, as your password for your Windows server. Alright. And here's a warning. Don't worry about that. We don't need to worry about that so far. Keep going. So our domain name will be linchen. That's alright. Keep going. That's what we want. And this is where we're gonna store the log file on the database. Yes, that's where we want. Remember, ntds.dit file, right? That's our database. Okay, so ntds is our database. Keep going, and here's a review for installation. Keep going. Now you're gonna take a look. You're gonna check all the requirement. That's how do we satisfy the requirement. If all good, then we can install. Okay, all per request, check pass successfully, so we can click install. It will take a little while, so that's fine. So give it some time to installation. Alright, now installation complete. Our server will gonna restart. You can see here, congratulations for the required installation succeed on our host. Okay, so now it will restart the computer. Let's give it some time, because this is the first time for our host to start as the DC. So you're gonna set up and apply all the strategy for the DC. Because I have two virtual machines running at the same time, so it may take a little bit long while. That's fine, just wait. Okay, let's wait for them. Alright, let's log in. Now you can see we have the domain name at first beginning. Alright, so let's take a look. Another service. So we can see in our administration tool, we have several new tools we can find. Like see here, they are all for the AD, right? Because we just installed our AD. So you can see we have more tools. For this, they are talk about the AD. Okay, they are focused on AD. And we can have the EDSI and DNS. These two, they are for the DNS. Also, as we just installed. Okay, we just installed. Leave it there. So let's turn on the AD user and computers. Okay, let's turn on the AD user and computers. Turn on this. So in this AD user and computer, linchun.com we just create. Can you see there's the domain controller DC? Okay, click DC. We can find out here we have one DC, right? And the DC name is the win2012_1, which is our host, which means we already have one DC being set in our AD. Okay, and also we can check our DNS. In our DNS, we can check the log for our linchun. Okay, the forward lookup zoom. Let's check the TCP. So as you can see for the LDAP and GC, right, they are all point to the same DC, which is our first DC. Okay, win2012_1.linchun.com. So that we already complete our first step to set the first DC for our root domain linchun.com. Okay, until now we complete the first step, which we set the first DC. Okay, set the first DC for our domain linchun.com. All right. So right now we can install the second DC for our domain. This is our second one. So let me minimize this and optimize this one. Okay, let's log in for the second host. So this one is our Windows 2012_2, which is the second host. And based on our topology, we try to set this as our second DC for our domain. Okay. Why we need a second DC? Okay, why we need a second DC? Normally, when we try to set up DCs for a real case in the domain, we need always two DCs at least. Why? Because if there's we only have one DC, right? Then if the first DC is done, then we need the second DC to support all the service for the domain. All right. And if all the condition satisfied, then we can even move all the service, all the supporting service, and even the 5 FSDO, okay, 5FSDO to the second DC. What is FSDO? Okay, so I leave this question to you to find out. Okay, what is the 5FSDO? FSDO. So let's try to set up the second DC for our AD. And as always, we need to check are we on the right machine. So let me zoom in it. Okay, I think now it's better to view. As always, host name. As you can see, this is our second host. And let's take a look at the IP. We can see this is our IP address and our subnet mask, our gateway, DNS. Okay, we need to set the DNS. Okay, we cannot use the gateway as a DNS for this. Why? Because as mentioned, if we connect the DNS, then we try to looking for the linkchain.com. If there's the real linkchain.com in the real world, then we will visit that linkchain. Because we are doing an experiment, right? So we try to set the DNS service as our first host, which is the Windows 2012_1. Okay. So let's try to change it. So we have to change the IPv4. And change the IP address to set the fixed IP address to 168.44.130. And the gateway, that's fine. Sorry, that's 2. And for DNS, and what's the IP address for the last machine? I forgot. Sign, yes, we sign. Is that 129? Yes, it's 129. Okay, it's 129. So we move back to here. Set as 129. Okay, which means we set the first host as our DNS server. Press OK. Okay, press OK. And after we press OK, we can take a look. Request some out. Can we ping this? We can ping. It should be okay. Yeah, it should be okay. Let's try to say linkchain.com. Okay, so we can resolve the IP, or resolve the domain, right? So domain name now we are linked to point us to this IP address, which is our first host. Okay, to our first host. Let me take a look. Can we ping it? Ping this domain. Okay, all good. So we can ping the domain, and we already set the DNS. Okay, which means our DNS service gonna set to the first host, which is the this is his IP address, which is this one. Okay, we set this because this is already a DNS survey, and we use our second machine, which is the _2, to use the first host as our DNS service. Now we can install the second DC for the AD. Okay, so let's keep going. We try to set this host as the DC number 2 and add to our existing AD linchun.com. As always, we turn on our server manager. And the steps is similar to our last one, just a slightly different. Give it some time. Still loading. So we give it manage, add role. We go next. And the pool we choose is the same host, okay, as our local host, which is the dashboard 2, which is our host so far. This is our IP address. And we try to add the role as the ADDS. And for the DNS service, it's optional. Okay, this one is optional. Why this one is optional? Because normally in each domain, we just need one DNS service. But as I mentioned, when the purpose of set the second DC, just in case our first DC is down, right? So that's also why I also choose here. Okay, so go next, next, and install. So let's give it some time for the installation. Until this step, we can see all the process are same. Okay, so will be different only when we try to promote it to the DC. All right, I just jumped to the step in case you're gonna need to keep waiting because my memory setting is too low. Okay, so it will take a little bit long while for installation. So now we can close it. So as in the first DC setting up, so we can click here, promote this server as another DC. So now we can see some difference here. In the first DC setting up, we add a new forest, right? But right now, we try to add this DC to the existing domain. Okay, so I try to select. Let's try say Linchen and administrator, the password. Does I press wrong one? Did I just press the wrong name? So let's do it one more time. Linchen, DMINSTRATOR, right? And my password. I see. I have a typo here. I missed the I. Sorry, that's my typo. So we select the domain. And let's do one more time. In case you get confused here. Say we say Linchen, ADMINISTRATOR, and the password. Okay, now we can see we can select our domain name. Okay, so we can go next. And here, if you still remember in the first domain controller setup, we cannot select the DC. It's being selected by default. But now the DC is optional, right? Why DC is optional right now? Just in case there are too much DC in the same domain. So sometimes we don't only choose one DC. Okay, when we install one DC. But here we can still create one DC for our, GC. We can still create one GC for our second DC, that's fine. For the read-only DC, excuse me, so as its name, for some remote access, we only want to read the resource from DC. We don't want to write it. Okay, so we can set as remote-only DC, but we don't check it, but we check the GC for it. And as always, the password for the DSRM. Keep going. And replication from, we can choose this, okay, or we can choose from any domain controller because we only have one. So it doesn't matter, choose this or choose two, right? Any domain controller, we only have one, so it doesn't matter. And as always, for the database log file, same place, but in this host, okay, in this host. And here's a review. If you remember, in the first time when we set up the DC, there's one more option to set up the level, right? The level we can choose Windows Servers 2012 R2 version, but here we don't need to change, okay, because this is the second DC, and we already set the whole AD, so we don't need to check. We don't need to change that. Just go next. So you're gonna pre-request check. Okay, all good. Installed. And as always, once the installation complete, it will ask you to restart the computer. Okay, it will ask you to restart the computer. Okay, now installation complete. You're gonna restart the computer for us. So you can see here, congratulations, installation succeed on this host. Okay, now the second host, not -1, it's -2. So now we will restart the computer to complete the installation for the second DC. Okay, here we go. So now applying some strategy. Let's log in. I'm sorry it's taking a long while for login, because for my memory, we don't have the sufficient memory for the virtual machine, especially I'm turning to virtual machine here. For this is for the VM tour. And as always, remember for the first setting, like I don't want to turn it, it will work automatically. I can check this. So when NAR start automatically when the log on. Alright, so let's go to administrative tour. We can find here we have 5 AD tour and 2 AD tours for the DNS. Let's take a look at the first one. Firelinkchen.com for this domain. Let's take a look at the domain controller. Now you can see. Now we have 2 domain controller. Okay, _1 and _2. So in your lab report, you should give me like the screenshot like this. You have 2 domain controller. Okay, you have 2 domain controller. And for the DNS, let's check look the log. We can take a look the log for Linchen TCP. Now you can see for the GC and for the LDAP, we can have point to two hosts, right? One is point to the our _1, one is point to _2, which means until right now, we already have two DCs in this domain, linchun.com. Okay, now we already complete the second step, set the second domain controller, and we try to do the next one, which we try to set the subnet. All right, so far let's try to add the domain, add the subdomain, and with the DC, which we use the host 3, Windows Server 2012 host 3 to set as domain, set as the DC for the subdomain. So as always, before the operation, we need to check, are we log on the right host? So this is our host. Okay, this is our host. How about rpconfig? So we can see our IP address, and we can see our gateway with the DNS server. So far, the DNS server is used the same as the gateway, so we don't want that happen. We want it point to our first host, which is our DNS server, which is here. Okay, this one, machine number 1, and we remember our IP address is .19129. So here we should set our IP. Our IP is 192.168.4.131, 68.4, 44 and 2. So DNS we should use 119.168.4.129, right? Double check. Yes, 129. 44.129. So I press OK. Give some time to respond. Okay, I believe now our DNS server. Okay, now the DNS server, you can see it is 44.129, which is our first host. Let's try to take a look at the resolution. Sorry, it's a lookup. Let's try to check the linchun.com. Alright, so here we can see we have two IP address, okay, for the DNS server, point to the our domain name, linchun.com. Let's try to ping it. I didn't turn that on. Maybe that's the error, because I only turned the first machine on, which is the 0.9. Right. Let's try to ping 0.9. 129. Okay, 129 is working. Let's try to turn on another host, which is our machine number 2. So I'm logging on the machine number 2, which is our second, which is this one, second DC of our root domain. All right. So it really tests the capacity of your host machine, your local machine, like your CPU, your memory. Because I said give each virtual machine 2 GB memory, So I think that's fine because I totally have 8 giga. So far already turned 3 machine is running. So it will take me around 6 giga so far. Okay, so our machine number 2 is turning on. Now I believe we can ping this IP, which is 30. See, we can get a response. Okay, now it's working. So even we ping Linchen, it is working. Okay, it's working. All right, so let's try to set up the DC for our subdomain. All right, it's ready. So we add a row. The steps is similar. Choose our host, which is machine number 3. 131 is our IP address. We add the ADS and DNS. Why we also need to add the DNS here? We are creating the subdomain, right? So the subdomain is kind of like a new domain. All right, so we should also create this DNS server here. Click next and install. Okay, installation succeed. Close that. As always, we'll promote that as the DC. Okay, remember this one. For the first host, which is our machine number 1, we set that DC for our root domain, right? So we choose as a forest. And for the second one, which is the second machine of the DC, we set the DC as the root. We choose add the domain to the add the domain controller to the existing domain. Okay, then for this subdomain, we should say add the new domain to existing forest. All right, because we have the forest, so we try to add a new domain, which is subdomain visit. And the subdomain we choose children, and let's select. Root is our Linchen, ADMINISTRATOR. Password. Let's try to retrieve the forest, the domain from the forest. Okay, we found it. Okay, linchen.com. And we set a new name, let's say CS, computer science. Okay, someone may ask, hey Linchen, can we type the full name of the subdomain? We can take a look. See, there will give the arrow. Okay, this is the invalid format. So we only need the subdomain name. We don't need a complete domain name here, just CS. All right, so we can go next. And for the functional level, we can choose forest. Why? Because this has been set at first beginning when we set the root domain. Because when we set the root domain as the Windows Server 2012 R2, so that's the only option we can choose. And as always, we can set as GC, read-only node, and set the the SRM password. Okay, getting good. Keep going. For the log file and database, same place for this host. And that's a review. Let's keep going. Okay, satisfy the check. Install. Alright, so far so good. You will ask us to restart the computer. You're gonna restart for us. Installation succeed on our machine number 3. Okay. So the computer will restart by its own self. And as always, give some time to set up the new strategy for this subdomain. Alright, so you're gonna apply the strategy. So it looks like 2 GB memory, that's fine. Maybe not. Still take a long while for logging. So I believe after this step, we will complete the subdomain installation. Okay, so for the root domain, we have 2 DC. For the subdomain, we have 1 DC. So we already complete the third step. Okay, so we can log in. Okay, so something we need to turn it on. Administrative tour. I want to turn on the domain and trust. I want to turn on the user and computer. And the last one is DNS. Okay, let me show you one by one. So let's check the first machine first, which is the DC1 from Lincoln. which is on the root. So for the user and computer, we can see for the Lincoln domain, okay, domain controller, we still have two domain controller, 2 DC, right? 2 DC, 1 and 2. Okay, machine 1 and 2. How about for the DNS? For the DNS, we have Lincoln. Okay, we have Lincoln. Take a look at TCP. This is the audio record. Okay, point to the first and second machine. And why the GC we are here one more time? Okay, because as you can see, we have the subfolder here. Can you see it? As CS. That's our subfolder we just created because that's our subdomain. Okay, that's our subdomain we just create. All right, and let's take a look at our children. Machine number 3. Okay, so make sure this is machine number 3. Let me show you. So okay, this is machine 3. Okay, so we can take a look. First, I want you to see is the user and the computer. This is our domain. Okay, for the domain controller, we have only one. Okay, which is our host, machine number 3. Okay, that's our domain controller. And how about DNS? We only have one DNS. Okay, no matter the AP or the they only point to one host, which is this one. And one more thing I want you to check. Remember, we have the trust relationship. Okay, so for Lincoln, okay, for Lincoln, let's take a look. So trust Lincoln.com, trust cs.lincoln.com. The trust type is children, right? And transitive is yes. All right, because Lincoln.com is father, and cs.lincoln.com, which is children. All right, and if we take a look the children, okay, this is children. We check the property, check the trust. You can see Lincoln.com is its parents. Okay, so this can also prove we just create the children and parents. So this is our subdomain, which is CS. Then if you want to add a new trust, you can just add here. Okay, you can just add here to add a new trust. Okay, but that's belong to the other part of the experiment, so we don't need to work right now. So far, we already complete the first 3 steps in our experiment. Okay, to set the domain, which is Lincoln.com, and we set 2DC for it, and we set a subdomain, okay, cs.lincoln.com, and we assign the DC for it, which is machine 3. All right. Okay, we are recording. So let's try to move to the last step, which we try to set the Win10 as a guest to join the domain. Okay, I will not test for the both domain. Maybe I can test it. So what I have before is like we have 3 Win10 or Win2012 server running together, right? And when I try to turn the Win10, because I set my Win10 virtual machine use 4 giga, all right? So what I have, like, I have 2 giga for this, plus 2 giga for this, and plus 2 giga for this machine. I already use 6 giga. And for my Win10, I set as 4 giga. Okay, so total get 10 giga requirement for the RAM. But for my desktop, I only have 8 giga. So that's really jam on the start there. All right. So I have to turn off the this machine and this machine. Only left the first DC and the client of the Win 10. So if you want to work on this, do this experiment, make sure you will allocate your RAM wisely. You can either to reduce the RAM for each machine, or do not turn on too much machine at the same time. Okay. All right. So far, I got the first machine of the which is Win server. So I can see the host name, which is the first machine. Okay. And let's say my Windows. Let me log in. This is our Win 10. And let's try to take a look at our DNS. So first is host name. Did I change it? Okay, I already changed the host name to Win 10. Okay, I already changed the host name to Win 10. That's great. It's layout or form. How do I increase the size for this? Okay, now it's much bigger. Okay, so I already changed the host name. How about IP? We can see our IP is 132. Our DNS, I didn't change the DNS, so we need to change the DNS. Okay, we need to change the DNS. Property. Actually, I'm not getting used to with this setting. I prefer the old version. Can I just get the old version? Advanced sharing option. How about this? Did it work? Sort of. How about change adapter option? Oh, I found it. Network and sharing center. See, over here. Okay, so we can use this. I don't want this. Yes, I want this one. So click network and sharing center. Okay, network sharing center. Go to the Ethernet property. Sorry, it's a bit slow because I don't set much RAM for this Win 10. Double click that. Set our IP. Sorry. 0.168.44.132 to 168.44.2. And for the DNS, that's serious. Okay. 0.129, remember? Is that 129? I remember it's 129, sorry. Is that 129? Config. Yes, 129. Okay, 129. So please set as 129. So now, let's try to double check the DNS so far. Okay, 129. Let's NS lookup. Okay, 129. Check linchen.com. Alright, good. We got the DNS. Because we are doing experiment, right? We are setting the virtual domain. So we don't want to go to linchen.com. Okay, we don't want to go to linchen.com, the real linchen.com. Hopefully we have linchen.com. Maybe in the future, I will build my own linchen.com. Alright, so what are we gonna do next? Based on our purpose, we try to use our client to join our domain, right? Let's say join this root domain, linchen.com. What are we gonna do? We're gonna go to the property. How can I check our property? Sorry, we should go to PC, computer, system property. I don't like this old version. this new version. Rename the PC. Aha, no, not this one. Where I can get the old version. System protection. That's protection. Manage device. System. Computer management? No, I don't think so. Setting. What it will give us. Let me find out what we're gonna have, okay? Okay, alright. I found it. Oh, that's not easy. We click setting and system and then about. After that, we go to advanced system setting. Okay, advanced system setting. Hey, can we rename the PC? Also working. Good. Then we type change. Okay, like we changed the name. Now we add the domain. Okay, so we domain set linchen.com. Okay, this is we're gonna join the domain. Press enter and press the domain name. Say linchen ADMINISTRATOR password. That's taking a while. Okay, see, we joined the domain successfully. Okay, welcome to linchen.com domain. Okay, so this is our final step. So today we complete 4 steps. We create the domain linchen.com. Okay, we have 2 DC. And we also create a subdomain cs.linchen.com with the DC for it. And finally, we use our client Win10 to join this domain. Okay, but I didn't join the both one. You can join the subdomain. Okay, but make sure you turn on the third machine. Okay, because so far my memory is running out. So I just joined the root domain. You can join the subdomain. That's also same step. Just do remember you have the third machine running. All right, so that's it. Welcome to ask me any questions. And as always, thank you for your time.